Hello and welcome to Coup Save America. We have not one, not two, but three guests here today. As you can see, I'm not the usual host, Sean St. Hart. Sean is unfortunately very sick today, but I hope you'll stay tuned and give me a chance because we're on the eve of an especially dramatic presidential election and the show must go on. We have two more special guests here with us today for the Battle of the Books. William R. Douglas and Dan McCrory have each written a novel about the apocalyptic events that could occur if one of our country's political parties were to seize power and run with it. The difference between their books is that Williams tells a story of Democrat extremists gone off the rails, while Dan's book is about what could happen if Republican extremists decide that enough is enough. Although the two novels we are examining on today's episode are very different, they also have a lot in common. And I'm not just talking about EMP attacks, re-education camps, and a declaration of martial law. Both of these books warn us about the danger we face as a nation if we continue down our path of social division and refuse to accept anything that the other side has to say. I see these two works as polar opposite political polarization novels. And with a cast of over-the-top characters placed into hair-raising situations, are these books mere satire or a looming reality? You be the judge. We'll figure it all out right after the break here on Coup Save America. Welcome back. Our first guest today is William R. Douglas, an award-winning novelist whose debut novel, The Death and Resurrection of Baseball: Echoes from a Distant Past, was recognized by two book award contests, Reader's Favorite and the Independent Author Network. His latest novel, The Sum of All Our Anger: Civil War 2.0, is a speculative fiction story set in 2061, a time when the nation's anger finally comes to a boil after the inauguration of the first openly socialist president. Okay, so here is a teaser for The Sum of All Our Anger: Civil War 2.0. What if our present day polarizations and anger go unchecked? What if they continue to simmer and intensify with no relief? Award-winning author William R. Douglas takes the reader into a realm of the unthinkable with his gripping and sweeping new novel, The Sum of All Our Anger. In 2061, new President Devon Cyrus is determined to sweep away the old way in America to pave a way for a socialist utopia under his new way policy. First, he must deal with renegade states by whatever means necessary. Oklahoma Governor Mary Whitfield, a patriotic supporter of the old way, rallies like-minded governors and citizens to keep a remnant of the old Union intact by opposing the new way at all costs. Military, National Guard, militia, and civilian leaders must choose sides as events escalate. Our union and way of life hang in the balance as the two opposing worldviews collide head-on in a final showdown. Which one will triumph? Sorry, gotta get this thumbnail off my face. And there we go. And now we can bring in William. Hello,
Hi,
William.
Mackenzie.
Hi.
Thanks for
Welcome.
having me on the show.
Oh, no problem. Let's jump right into things because I have so many questions. So your novel about the revival of baseball also features a futuristic Second American Civil War. So what inspired you to flesh out the idea further in The Sum of All Our Anger?
Yeah, great question. In my debut novel, The Death and Resurrection of Baseball, a second Civil War is 100 years in the past, and it was a proverbial nail in the coffin event, if you will, that finally kills off the sport of baseball. The premise of the first novel is that the sport has been on a slow decline in popularity for the last several decades, and then finally, this second Civil War comes along, and like I say, it's like a nail in the coffin event. So the book was very well received, won some awards, and I was on quite a few podcasts, and a lot of the hosts would ask me, "Are you going to write about this Civil War that's in this book?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not sure I want to do that because it's not something I want to happen for sure." I've got 9 grandkids now and 6 kids, and I love them all dearly. And the idea of a second Civil War is horrific. But
Well, I don't
as
think it comes to be just because you write about it.
I'm sorry.
I said I don't think the Civil War will come to be just because you've written about it.
Oh, correct. Well, yeah, I hope not. So, but
So is this the same Civil War that is referred to in the past from?
yeah. So it's so the second book is very loosely tied to the Civil War. That's a point of history in the first book.
Mm,
So there's 2 characters in particular that are briefly mentioned in the first book, Bishop Jackson King and also Deshaun King. They're a father and son.
okay, I'm not gonna give
Uh,
anything away, but
yeah,
those were really good characters that
yeah, yeah.
provided at least a little bit of, oh, what would the word be? Um, okay, sorry, I can't let's
That's all
just
right.
there's some very touching scenes between the father and son
Yeah, yeah,
that is a great part of the book.
yeah.
Okay, so you decided to go ahead and go with it and write the next one.
Yeah, the real driver, was as the domestic, political, and social conditions began to deteriorate at a very increasingly negative rate. I mean, things just got really crazy and are still crazy. And in the summer of 2023, I finally realized that, what, things are getting so bad. I'm greatly concerned about the future that we're going to be handing off to my kids and their kids. And so I knew it was time to try and tackle the project. So off I went.
So this is a warning about the future,
Yeah,
and
the book. Yeah, correct.
and so I had made the mistake maybe of referring to the book as satire when I was talking with you earlier, and then you said, "Oh, wait, no, I don't intend this as satire." So I wanted to say a couple of things about why I had looked at it as
Sure,
satire,
sure.
and basically, to me, the characters just seem way over the top.
Yeah,
um, they don't seem realistic. They seem like people. I mean, for example, I don't want to give away stuff from too much from the book or anything, but President Cyrus, the new um, socialist um, lib, progressive president, is an absolute lunatic. Definitely one of the main villains of the book, and he's way more worried about owning the cons, the conservatives. I mean, all he
yeah,
wants to do is show them that they're wrong and he's right, and he has no real interest in serving as an effective leader of the country. And then and then on the other side, the constitutionalists, as the renegade, um, the people who take back their country from the libs, but they're the good guys, but they aren't they don't seem to be realistic characters either. They seem like they're acting like petulant children throwing tantrums because they aren't getting their way a lot of the time. Of course, that's offset by the fact that the the new president and the democratically elected president. So we're not just talking about the president here. We're talking about the majority of people um, have. But the president. Okay, sorry about. The, I think the real villain. No, I don't want to give away anything about the story. Sorry. Let's just say that. Yeah, for just one example, like the atheists in your book. I mean, I know a lot of atheists, and none of them just fly off the handle when somebody mentions God. They start yelling and berating. I mean, and so I just don't see the country, especially people who become leaders of the country. I mean, even the good side here, they've been spoiling for a war. Colonel Adams, he got tired of the woke culture, and so he moves his whole family to Montana and forms an underground militia. um, it seems like everybody is just way over the top as far as their reactions to things, which is fine. I mean, it wouldn't be an interesting novel if everybody behaved rationally, but
Mm-hmm.
that's why it struck me as satire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, to counter your statements, I would say that first and foremost is that because the book is designed to be a warning, um, we have to take a step back and look at the premise of the story. The premise of the story is that when you take our current political state and our current social state in this country, and you see the trajectory that we're on, and unless some force intervenes to intercept that trajectory, I see only one probable outcome, and that would be another armed conflict. Now, again, it's not something I want at all, but the question is what is going to intercept the trajectory that we're on? And specifically addressing your observations on the characters, I would respectfully disagree to some degree, to some respect, because I think, for instance, the president that's in the book um, is very popular with half the country, but he is a hardcore socialist slash Marxist. He's firmly convinced that his ideology is correct. He's firmly convinced that the old way or the constitutional republic that we all currently know and love um, is something that needs to be uh, permanently retired and replaced. And at the back of my book, I have a lot of articles that I cite that are really a case of life imitating art. And some of the crazy stuff that I came across, I mean, you wouldn't believe it unless you actually saw it. I was very careful that in the sources that I cite in the back of the book, and I didn't use Fox News because half the country doesn't trust Fox News, right? So I went through normal main or legacy media sources for some of these stories. I'll give you an example, right? So the very opening part of the book, I think I can do this. I'm the author, but spoiler alert. But the new president decides that the Constitution, which was quote authored by white supremacists, is an antiquated document and needs to be replaced completely. So a few years ago in the New York Times, two law professors, one from Harvard and one from Yale, they wrote an opinion piece and it was published in the New York Times. And the name of the piece was that the Constitution is broken and should not be fixed. And I'm like, wow. And these are leaders in our academic community teaching our young people, and they feel very very passionately that something that we, I assume most of your listeners would agree that we all know and love our founding documents. Somehow these documents are antiquated, obsolete, or because they were written by quote white supremacists, that they should be nullified. Of course,
Well,
I strongly disagree with that.
yeah. Well, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, I mean, I agree with you. There's no reason to throw out the entire Constitution, but in your book, it does. At one point, they're talking about people who support the Constitution with fervor, and then Colonel Adams is talking to his assembled patriots, and he says the argument some libs make is that the Constitution is a living and breathing document. Oh, the argument that some libs make that the Constitution is a living and breathing document fails scrutiny and is dangerous. And so he is contending that the Constitution's main purpose is to protect the political minority from the whims of the current political majority. The political majority. And um, so yeah, no, I agree that the Constitution does not need to be scrapped and thrown out, but I do think that it is, or you could argue that it was written by people who lived in an entirely different time, entirely
Yeah.
different place. They could have no. They did a really good job. They did a really good job projecting the future and creating something that would be long-standing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it has to be stagnant. I mean, there is such a thing as amendments, and that brings me to my
Correct.
very favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
It also confused me a little bit, though, because the whole book seems to be preaching that the Constitution is sacred and unchangeable, and then at the very end, when the constitutionalists take back power, they add an amendment to impose term limits on senators and the House of Representatives, and I'm like, woohoo! That is an awesome idea. They don't really say why, but I think that's great because term limits would take money. It would do a lot to take money out of
Yeah.
politics,
Yeah.
and money is the problem that
Yeah.
stops any.
Yeah.
No matter what your thoughts are on. So anyway, that was
Sure.
my favorite part.
Yeah. Well, yeah, getting back to your comment about Colonel Adams, one of the big characters in the book, they support the Constitution with fervor. I mean,
Mm.
well, first of all, um, should we support the Constitution with mediocrity, or should we support it not at all? I mean, there you have a choice
Not at
when
all.
it comes to the Constitution.
My vote would land on mediocrity, though, not fervor.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I guess we agree to disagree, but
we're
in
gonna
any
agree
event,
on that
um,
one.
yeah,
Okay, well let's that kind of brings us to another one of the things that struck me um as satire-ish, as just you being comical about the whole matter. But then I obviously did not follow every link in your appendix that showing the things that prove that our country is going downhill. I mean, I didn't. But I read down the list to see what the topics were,
sure.
and the thing that struck me about the book was just there was a lot of what I would call symbols over substance. The Everybody is getting all passionate over things like what the new president has changed the flag, or he doesn't want to put his hand on the Bible. He wants to use a different book. You know, all these little meaningless things, and like the statues coming down. I mean, I'm on your side about the statues. Leave them up. That's our history. Don't we can't destroy our
Sure.
history.
Sure.
But I'm not passionate about it because it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the lives of people. And that's what the whole battle in the book seems to be all over symbolic icons that don't make any real difference to people. And
Well, I would take strong issue with that
yeah,
statement, because the battle of the book really has to do with whether or not we are to remain a constitutional republic as a free people,
does it say in the Constitution?
or whether or not we are going to scrap it all and start over as some kind of socialist slash
Well,
Marxist utopia.
I mean,
Um,
the Constitution says separation of church and state. So putting your hand on a Bible seems like it's against the Constitution.
Well, I think you're referring to the inauguration of the president in the book.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, there have been a handful of other presidents that refused to take the oath of office, putting their hand on the Bible. I merely put that in there as an illustration that this new leader is in his heart of hearts is a Marxist. He's an atheist, but primarily he's a hater of capitalism, and he's a hater of the constitutional republic that we currently are, and wants to burn it all down and start over again as a socialist utopia. So, I mean, him not putting his hand on a Bible is there anecdotally
Yeah.
as a part of his character that's who he is. So,
Yeah. And yeah, I don't have any problem with that portion of the book. Well, other than the fact that this is basically a socialist utopia show, um, that um, but it just seemed like there was a whole civil war going on, and the only time that the book ever referred to that I found of of any kind of issues is when President Cyrus makes his inauguration speech, and he lists the things that he plans to do on day one. And I love a lot of the things he was going to do, except it's ridiculous to just say we can just throw it out and just do it. I mean, but
yeah.
some of it when it wasn't in the inauguration speech, but another part it talked about how the libs had in the liberal Supreme Court, which does not exist and won't exist for many, many, many years, um, had lowered the age of consent to 12, and we don't need to talk about that or anything. But that's what made me think you were just being funny, because nobody's fighting to lower the age of consent. but um, but
Well,
one thing that President Cyrus mentioned. I mean, some of the things were crazy, some of the things were wonderful, but not you can't do it with a snap of your fingers. But one thing he mentioned was giving reparation checks of $1 million to African Americans. Now, obviously, that's impossible. That would not work. But the whole book it preaches anti-slavery. People are
yeah.
constantly talking about how bad slavery was, and that's absolutely correct. It was an abomination. But there's never a single mention of. I mean, see, the characters seem to think that as soon as slavery ended, the problem ended. I mean, are the constitutionalists going to do to improve the lives of those people that for generations and generations have just been affected by slavery? It didn't go away.
Well,
And
I think when you look at the American society, particularly from the mid 20th century on, after the civil rights movement, I mean, certainly we have to admit we see progress. I mean, the idea that there's not been progress is an absurd notion.
oh
We
yeah, there's
continue to see
definitely
progress.
progress.
Uh,
Hard
uh,
won, hard fought progress.
sure, absolutely. So, as far as the story goes in the novel, yeah, it's definitely mentioned, quite forcefully about the evils of institutional slavery that precipitated the Civil War of the 1860s.
But
But
it seems to want to keep
the
privatized prisons.
one thing that is mentioned in the novel too is that the Supreme Court. I mean, maybe you missed it, but the Supreme Court is in the book time consists of 13 judges,
Oh, okay, so
which
they
means
added
that the
judges.
court
So
has been expanded
that's how they got
from
the
its
liberals to
current
do
9 to 13, or
that.
some people use the term stack the court or whatever. But
Mhm.
and one thing that's occurred also is that the electoral college has been abolished. And so, at least in the book, the hint is there is that the Supreme Court has gone to the liberal side of the pendulum, if you will, and has ruled that the Electoral College is, null and void, whatever. Uh, but
And that is something
um,
that needs to be examined again. It was set up quite a long time ago when the country was a different place.
Well, I still believe that college was an act of brilliance, but that's a matter of opinion because
Yeah, I don't know
the
enough about
entire
it to
concept of
talk
electoral
about it.
college was that let's make an extreme example just to illustrate the point.
Mhm.
Let's say uh, 500 million people live in Los Angeles and 500 million people live in New York, and the rest of the country is all rural. Well, should the dictates of two major cities overrule the entire country? And of course, it shouldn't. Well, the Electoral College was an answer to that hypothetical that you can't have these isolated high population centers lording it over the rest of the country because at least
But
at the
what it
time.
does though is it reduces. I mean, I happen to like the electoral college because it means that I can vote my conscience.
Right.
My vote doesn't count. It doesn't matter. And so basically, you've got
Well, every
what?
vote matters. Every vote matters.
Nah, I
Yeah.
could vote. I could vote for somebody dead, and it wouldn't make one bit of difference because my state is going Democratic. And that's the thing with what 45. I don't know. I don't know how many swing states there are, but your vote doesn't matter unless you're in a swing state.
Well, I've been to Omaha Beach.
Hmm.
I've been to Gettysburg. I've been to Arlington National Cemetery. And I would beg to defer that the men uh, that gave up their lives for the cause of freedom. Uh, Part of what we do when we vote is to honor their sacrifice and to honor their memory.
Yeah.
And if we just take a cavalier attitude that my vote doesn't count, therefore I'm not going to vote, or maybe I'm just not going to do my research, I'll just do an eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or something. I mean, I think that
Well,
serves a
yeah,
discredit to the country and to
yeah.
the memory of the soldiers.
I'm a very strong proponent of voting. It's just the
Yeah,
presidential election. Your other votes matter a lot. Your
yeah.
presidential election, unless you're in a swing state, is basically your presidential vote is basically dictated by the way your state votes. Um, but that's not. Let me see. We have about 15 more minutes here.
Sure.
Um, let me run through the questions and see what I can find. That well, I guess what we can. I don't want to launch into capitalism. That there's no time for that. Maybe in the three-way talk. Um, so why don't we just talk about, okay, you say in at the end of your book, you say, as we Americans need to relearn the art of compromise in our, oh, sorry, I misread that. 1 second. We as Americans need to relearn the art of compromise in our political discourse. It is our current no holds barred, take no prisoners, non-negotiable stance that has put all our nation in great peril. And so what are your suggestions for, you know, talking with friends and family, or even more importantly, other people online? It's easier to talk to friends and family that you disagree with because you know them and you love them. But what is your what are your tips for talking with someone you disagree with and having constructive conversation like we're having right now?
Well, I think there has to be a willingness to listen. So I'm trying to listen to you, and I think I'm being polite and I'm not interrupting. I'm trying to be mindful of that. So I'm trying to hear what you say, and you are in turn being kind and listening to what I say. That's just a basic example of just trying to get along and hear each other out. And so, it doesn't matter if it's some conservative show or a liberal show. You get these talking heads on there, and they have a guest down with an opposing view, and it's just a nightmare. I mean, everybody's talking to one another. They don't listen. They're rude to one another. And it's not productive. It's not productive at all. I mean, there was a time in America when I mean, we could have these conversations. And when it was over, we went on about our business, and we were still family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, fellow politicians that are helping govern at all levels of our country. And now you have these divisions are so stark and they're so heated that you have family estrangements going on where people don't want to associate with a family member because one person supports one candidate, another person supports another candidate. I mean, that's absurd. It's absurd to get to that point where this is happening. And if it's absurd for family members to be like this, it's certainly absurd that this goes on with every other level of relationships that we have. We have to be able to take a step back and understand and listen to other individuals' passions as they articulate their passion for a candidate, an ideology, whatever the case may be, and then respectfully, if we want to offer our own opinions, okay. But at the end of the day, we need to still, like I say, be family, friends, neighbors, et cetera, et cetera.
Definitely.
And part of it's a mindset. You have to have a mindset that, like, okay, we're going to have this discussion. Maybe someone else initiates the discussion first, or maybe something's really on your mind and you want to bring it up. And it's so okay. Well, when you're done, end it in peace and go in peace.
Don't go to bed angry.
Yeah, wise words.
And so, okay, so you do believe that there is a credible fear. I just want to comfort you a little because I don't think the progressive movement has a foothold at all. There's no money in progressive stuff. And so I don't think you have to worry. I don't that the socialism is going to, I mean, capitalism has a very, very firm grip on our country. And I don't think it's going to release that grip, in your grandchildren's lifespans. And now
Yeah,
that's not saying there couldn't be a civil
sure.
war between the rest of us, but I don't see a liberal government. Now, you had mentioned, oh, sorry. I have to look at my notes here. Um oh, shoot. Okay, you said while the extreme right is also a threat, they have no sway in the mainstream institutions of higher learning. So expand on this idea that in the colleges, etc., that they are teaching a far left liberalism that could at some point overtake the country.
Well, I mean, that's verifiable. I mean, when you have two college professors get published in the New York Times telling us that the Constitution is broken and shouldn't be fixed,
But it was in the
okay.
opinion section. Yeah.
Well, the point being is that these are tenured professors in two Ivy League schools, responsible in part for teaching, our high school graduates uh, law, and that these students then go out in the world, and okay, so they've got this ideology that's being pushed on them that, yeah, you know what, my professor says the Constitution is broken, shouldn't be fixed. Well, okay, well, what do you think that's going to do to the student? Of course, it helps spread an ideology that is, in fact, cancerous to the survival of our country. And so, and that's just a microcosm. Like I say, there's tons of stories that I could that I point to in the back of the book. But when you connect the dots of all these things, and they go all over, and the idea that somehow, and when I say the extreme left, I'm not talking about regular mainstream Democrats that I consider to be patriotic. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the extreme left that really hates the country, that thinks the country has been evil since its founding, they hate capitalism, even though they're using an iPhone, which is a product of capitalism. It's kind of an irony there. And they hate our institutions, and they really do want to, tear it all down, tear it
Yeah.
all, start over.
See, the thing is, I just don't see those people. I mean, I don't see that as being more than a very small fringe. If I mean, I had never really encountered that level of
Yeah.
leftist to begin with. Um,
Well, yeah. Well,
but
when we had all the riots going on a couple years ago, if you would do freeze frames on the videos, you would see these posters that were very professionally well done. And at the bottom of these posters were the names of these organizations. And so I started capturing their names and looking them up. Well, they were all Marxist organizations, and every one of them, uh, one of their core principles was the destruction of the country and the rebuilding of it as a socialist slash Marxist country. They wanted to tear it all down. They wanted to get rid of the Constitution. They wanted to get rid of capitalism. They wanted to hand over the means of production to this giant new corporate, not corporate, but giant
yeah, I
new
was gonna say.
government, giant new government that was going to solve all of our problems and make everything all better again.
But
And so,
returning to the professors, though, for just a second. Um, so there were a couple of them that said that, but now remind me, the name is not coming to me. I don't have a very good short-term memory because of the drugs, the necessary cancer drugs that I'm taking gives me brain fog. But your character, Colonel Adams, had referred to a person who was um and remind me of the name of this person who was upholding the Constitution, who was saying that the Constitution, as it cannot be a living, breathing thing. Do you remember the name of the person?
I believe he was referring to Justice Scalia, who's no longer with
No,
us.
not Justice Scalia.
No, because there's two schools of thought on the Constitution.
Hmm.
One is called the originalist concept, and the other one is a living document concept. So, um, and they've been debating that for generations, and
Hmm.
it's not something that's going to get resolved anytime soon. But um, yeah, so that's the two views on the Constitution. They're the originalists and the living, breathing document theory. So,
Let me just find this guy's name. If I um, anyway, no, the person who made he's actually being quoted in the book, and I looked him up to see if he was fictional or a real character, and he is the expert source um, that Colonel Adams uses to
yeah.
say that capitalism is, I mean, not capitalism, the Constitution is sacred, the way it stands, and the way that it was written back then, not the way we interpret it now. And that person, that when I looked him up, I found out that he is a instructor at UCLA. I didn't have time to like research deep into him, but UCLA um, seems is more on the
Oh,
more
sure.
liberal side, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah,
So
I
do
don't
do
pretend to say that
that's
all the professors across all the
right,
major
because are there
universities are
enough of
crazy
them that are
leftists.
gonna make
Yeah.
are there enough out there preaching liberalism to make a difference? I mean, is there any evidence of that?
Well, I think when you look at particularly what happened this past spring with the protests that were clearly anti-Semitic and clearly a lot of them were aimed at U.S. citizens that really they were born here, and somehow they became the target of these anti-Semitic attacks. Well, that didn't happen in a vacuum because there were professors that were joining those protests. Hundreds, if not thousands, of professors calling for divestiture for all these institutions to sever any ties with the state of Israel. And so the idea that somehow these extreme leftists are a very small minority, I would have to respectfully reject. I think
Okay.
they're
Well, good.
serious in number.
I'm
Serious in
glad
number.
then. Our team is building a force, I suppose. All right. So yeah, we have to wrap it up now. So where would people go to find your book or more about you? What site would you send them to?
Yeah, so I have a website, author WilliamRDouglas.com. And it's a portal. From there they can go to the Amazon link or Apple Books link and pick up a copy. It's
Okay.
available as a paperback. The paperback's actually on sale right now until election day. So
Oh, okay.
uh, after that, it goes up a little bit. But the audiobook or not the audiobook, the Kindle book is also on sale for a buck until election day. Then it goes up back up to
Oh,
$4. So, but yeah, and then I've got social media links into Facebook and X,
okay.
and they can
Mm,
contact me through the author WilliamRDouglas.com website.
all right.
So
Well, no, just William R. Douglas, just letters.
yeah, just letters. Well,
We'll,
author,
or
yeah,
in the show notes, we'll put your social media sites and your.
author WilliamRDouglas.com. So
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we're going to pull you out, but bring you back again later.
sure.
All right. Um, sorry, finding my in my space in my notes. Um, so allow me to introduce our next author, Dan McCrory. Dan has been a labor activist for 30 plus years and a writer for even longer. He has penned well recognized works of fiction, nonfiction, screenplays, and even poetry. Sean and I had the pleasure of meeting Dan recently at a book reading in our area, but that doesn't mean he'll be given preferential treatment on this show. For example, I have not read nearly as much of his book as I read of Williams, but I'm hoping and planning not to agree with Dan about everything. And that said, let me pull up his book cover and read the teaser for worst case scenario election night. Okay. In in this satirical thriller that strikes uncomfortably close to real life events, President Adolph Wallace declares martial law and accuses the Democrats of rigging the election. Native Americans decide to band together and take back their country. Ensuing incidents call for an assessment of loyalties that could mean life or death. An EMP detonated by North Korea only makes matters worse. At times funny, and sometimes deadly serious, worst case scenario shows what could happen in this nightmarish state of affairs. All right, so now let's bring in Dan. Hi, Dan. Get rid of your book cover. There we go.
Hi, Mackenzie. How you doing?
Pretty good. Okay, so tell me,
I'm having a unstable connection, so let me know.
okay, why did you write worst case scenario? And why is your novel just as relevant now as it was when you conceived of the idea?
Well, I saw what was going on under the first Trump presidency, and I realized that um, there were some odd things going on that needed to be brought to people's attention. At the same time, I was also working on my next book, which should come out soon, called Leonard Comes Home, about Leonard Peltier. And he's a Native American who was framed for 2 murders of FBI agents by the FBI back in 1975. So I saw this anger by the Native Americans building to something, and as it did back in the 60s, early 70s. And so I thought, what would happen if there was this backlash against any kind of rigging of the election, and what would happen because of that? So I took it as far as I could go. I started the book on 2 months before the 2020 elections. Things just got really bizarre, and I said I can't possibly keep up with the real life here. So I set it aside for a while until someone said you need to take this to its natural conclusion. So that's how that all came about.
All right. And now your book is set in modern day America. It is obviously satirical. There's no question there, and it wasn't meant to be anything more than satirical, or was it? I do find worst case scenario. It strikes me as more realistic, as something that could actually happen, um, because of one of the differences with your story is that there's a lot of individuals. Just it's not all the big generals. Now the generals, of course, and President Adolf Wallace, which doesn't mean anyone in particular, just a random fictional president. um, yeah, of course the
Exactly.
big ones are in there too, and they are stirring the pot and participating in the whole thing. But mostly, when it comes down to just the absolute um, violent and horrific acts. Okay, I was going to say that the violent and horrific acts are mostly done by civilians, citizens who just fly off the handle. But I guess I forgot that the president himself did shoot a few justices in the head, and so I guess everybody has just gone on
Yeah.
a murderous rampage in your book. um, but the
Yeah,
thing is,
some of it could happen tomorrow.
yeah,
Other
I know.
parts are definitely satire.
See, I don't see anything happening tomorrow, or I mean, yeah, I don't see anything that outrageous happening as far as presidents, senators, generals, those people that need to at least maintain some decorum and dignity. But people on the streets, after this upcoming election, I don't know what could happen. Oh, I forgot. I didn't have time to look up before the episode, but I did want to mention that here in our state of Washington, people have there has been some attacks on ballot boxes and blowing up, people's votes. And I meant to look up to see if they knew who was doing that or why. Um, my guess is that it's just somebody playing practical jokes. Um, I if not, then I would have to speculate that it would be the right, just because we are a left. Our area is very much to the left. If someone wants the votes to be destroyed, they probably must be on the right. But I don't know. I can't say, because I don't know if that information is out there. One, and if it is out there, I didn't get a chance to look it up. But I'm just saying, things like that, I can see that happening. I can see people who have let their anger just boil over, going out and targeting their neighbors. What do you think?
I think that one of the issues about my book is it is too uncomfortable to imagine that some of this stuff could happen. But we're seeing it left and right. I was watching something on TV last night, and it said, "That's in my book. That's in my book. That's in my," and it scared the hell out of me, because I wanted it to be satire. I don't want it to actually happen, but unfortunately, a lot of it is unfolding just as I wrote it, and what I'm worried about is that one or both of these books could be used to create this revolution that we're talking about, because we've got the written material that would give us the blueprint for waging just such a revolution, I guess. And I don't want it to be used for that purpose. I just want it, like William said, to raise the possibility of what could happen.
Yeah, well, you better hope that what Jung. Sorry, I don't remember the North Korean president's name. But yeah, you better hope he doesn't read it, because he would have to be participating too. to get that plan to go off written. um, so, despite any fears or any rhetoric, or we did have a peaceful transition of power when Trump left the White House, and I anticipate that whatever happens come Tuesday, or not Tuesday, but January, whatever, um, that we will have another peaceful transition of power. Do you think that whichever direction this election goes, that are you fearful that things are going to get wilder this time? Has our anger boiled up enough?
Yeah, I think that last time we did not have a peaceful transfer of power. We had January 6th, and January 6th people died. And I keep hearing hints coming from the mouth of the Donald Trump that this could very well happen again. He says day one he's going to be a dictator. Who's going to tell him to step down after day one? He's made some outrageous comments that if he's, I've seen a recent documentary that said that he was kept in control until he actually got elected, and all of a sudden all bets were off, and he was talking about using nuclear weapons and things like that, which, as you know,
Yeah, but Trump
occur
is
in
a
my
lot of
book.
talk.
So
I mean, I don't know that we
yeah,
can
but
believe what he says, everything he says, or anything he says.
I hope,
Now, and
yeah,
here,
I
again,
hope
to play devil's advocate, was January 6th
yeah,
really what the Democratic side has made it out to be? Now, we did have a guest on this show who was on the ground. He was a history teacher who had decided to go out into um, just to take a year off and tour the country and look for something to write a book about. And he was going to write a book about our city and our, but anyway, then he happened to be there on January 6th, and so he was interviewing the people who were there. He wrote, and then he wrote a whole book about the true, and he is a liberal Democrat. I mean, he's not, but he was being very neutral for this book. And while there were a few people there, individuals that scared him, his take on the whole thing was that, I mean, it was nothing organized, and that basically he almost got pushed into the Capitol building himself, just by being there trying to observe. And he thinks that people got pushed in there. They stood there, they looked around, they're like, "What are we doing?" You know, people could have done things and they didn't, and people did die, but nobody died at the hands of. I mean, the deaths. I don't recall anything specific, but yeah, I mean, it was not a good thing. January 6th. That was crazy, but it was also not something that.
yeah.
I mean, the, the left used it. The left used that incident to their own. To I think they really overblew it a lot, and the stories that went out, the narrative that went out was not really honest as to just the people getting caught up in some kind of chaos that led nowhere organized. Anytime you have a mob, there's going to be casualties, I think, like that. So no, I'm not saying let's go have another January 6th, not for sure. But I wonder that if Trump said anything inflammatory again, if people would have learned from that and not gone off half cocked trying to figure out, well, what's the president telling us to do? And um, I'd like to think, but I don't know.
Personally, it's unprecedented that something like this has happened because
Yeah.
for one, while it was occurring, I had tears in my eyes because it was a deliberate, direct attack on our institutions. And if you want to talk about having some compassion and passion for our Constitution, for a flag, for all those kinds of things, our rule of law. That was a clear blow in the face of all of that. And I hope we never see anything like that ever again.
Yeah.
And he did incite it. He said, we have to fight for this, we have to fight for that. The word fight kept coming up. And then during the fake assassination attempt, when he's posing with the, like this, or with the Secret Service, it was so theatrical, I couldn't possibly swallow that as anything other than fiction.
Yeah. Oh, do you think that the assassination attempt was a setup?
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. I hadn't. Let's see. Like I said, no, I didn't have time to read your book. I was waiting. I was promised an audio version. When's the audio coming out? The Audible coming out? But I did notice a couple of things I wanted to mention. Not criticisms, but just it's set in modern day America, and you've got test patterns on the televisions. Is that still a thing?
Yeah.
Is it? I don't know. Nobody has a television.
When you lose your signal, that's the backup. Yeah, they still have those.
We still have it. Okay, I wasn't sure because nobody has cable anymore, and
right.
Phones that are busy. I remember phones that were busy when I was a kid, but
yeah,
I don't know. Phones aren't busy anymore.
Yeah, it depends on. Yeah, you're right. Call waiting is taking that away.
Yeah, somebody might not answer the phone, but you don't get that busy signal. Okay, so we're gonna wrap. I know you got a little bit less time than William, since unfortunately I wasn't as prepared. But we're getting on to this is going to be the final hour, so.
Right. Well, my book's shorter too, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's actually fair because, I mean, we've got 400 pages versus I've got a copy of the book right here. 400 and something pages versus 161. So he really should have 3 times as much time as you.
There you go.
And okay, so we're gonna bring William back in, and I think you guys have some questions for each other. If you don't have enough for the whole time, I can always bring in capitalism. Right.
My book was short, by the way. It wasn't written in chapters. My book was shorter too because it wasn't written in traditional chapters. It was written in scenes like a movie.
Oh yeah, your screenplay experience coming in, and your book could be a movie pretty easily. I guess both books could be a movie. Could be movies. Next, we might have another episode that's the Battle of the Movies. All right, welcome back, William.
Hey, thanks for part 2 here. Dan, I want to congratulate you on getting your book out. I know what it's like to try and do that. It's a huge project. No matter if it's 400 or 170, it's always a huge thing to get a book up on Amazon. So because they've got their own things that they screen the book for. If it doesn't pass, then they don't let it out. So it's a lot of work. So
yeah, I've heard that they don't allow books about sex with robots, and that's all I want to write about is sex with robots. Come on.
And it sounds like a challenge to me.
No comment.
So let's see. So William, you haven't been able to talk for a while. You've been off stage. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Dan, or any comments or reactions from anything, his book or anything he said?
Yeah, I read part of his book, and I'm, I don't really want to like have a critique thing of Dan's book.
No.
Because, I mean, as he said, it was kind of written, kind of to be kind of like satire, and I grew up in the '60s, and we had a comic book called Mad Magazine. Probably, I don't remember that Mad Magazine, And that was satire. So you had this character that would, they put this character in all these different current events of that era. So, I mean, I'd like to focus on themes rather than a page by page or a section by section critique of Dan's book, because I respect any man or woman that can take the time, carve it out, get something down, and get it published where it's actually for sale to the public. So I respect the work that Dan put into his novel. I mean, I don't, I have a different viewpoint with my storyline that opposed to Dan's, but that's okay. As we talked earlier about agreeing to disagree, I communicated with Dan offline. We had some jokes, and he talked about what was it, a poster? What did you say? That a campaign poster burning or something like that? So, but it wasn't me. But
so do you think it would be absolutely out of the question that if the Democrats win this next election, do you think that it's out of the question that there would be some kind of I mean, there's probably not going to be an apocalypse like Dan's book, but would there be some kind of backlash of, hey, it was rigged,
Yeah, well, first of all, let me do a level set, just for the sake of your listeners and also for you, Dan, and you, Mackenzie. I truly believe that there are millions of Democrats that are patriotic Americans. Millions of them. I really do. Some of them are my friends. Some of them are my family members. And that they are not extremists. Okay. Now, conversely, I also believe that there are, many millions of Republicans, conservatives, whatever you want to call them, that are not that are also patriotic and are not fascists. I mean, it was very disturbing to hear the word fascist get thrown out so liberally this election cycle. I think it's dangerous. I do agree that you brought up January 6th, Dan. Good point. I think that anyone that violated the law on January 6th should have, they have to have a day in court, and a judge needs to decide the consequences for violating the law. Now, I will say this, and it kind of dovetails into what you said, Mackenzie, about this history teacher that was interviewing people, and all of a sudden people, they're in a crowd. I mean, yeah, you can be at the back of a crowd and get pushed around against your will, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, where am I now? Why are we in here? So, but when you see people at the front of the line tearing down barricades, using them as battering rams, trying to attack the police officers, that's a problem. That is a problem. I have a serious problem with that. But when it comes to January 6th is such, it was a horrible day, absolutely a horrible day. It should never happen again. It was, in part, it was fueled by the crazy QAnon conspiracy theorists. They were totally off their rockers, in my opinion. And so you have that element in there. But when it came to the day that counted, January 6th didn't count when it comes to the actual inauguration, because they were going to count those votes no matter what happened that day, right? Even if they had to do it underground in a bunker, they were going to count the electoral votes and certify the election. I mean, the day that really counted as far as the transition of power was January 21st of 2021. And on that date, precisely at noon, just as it was supposed to occur, President-elect Joseph Biden took the oath of office. And there was no attempt to interrupt that day. There was no attempt to have some kind of mass right-wing protest on that day. And and trying to prevent it from happening. And so I think, if Trump was really a fascist, that would have been the day that he showed up with rogue generals and tried to do the fascist thing,
Yeah.
but he didn't.
Like President Cyrus would have done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of history. I know my history pretty well, I think, and I've seen what fascists have done in history. Once they obtain power, they don't ever leave of their own free will. They don't leave peacefully. It's always through violence that they're finally forced out.
What do you think about the hints that Trump is dropping that he won't leave? He won't be peaceful the next time.
I haven't seen those comments. I mean, I know a lot of what he says. Bill Maher on his show the other day really called the media to task over this latest thing about Liz Cheney. I mean, they totally twisted the words that Trump said, and there is other evidence as well that has occurred too. I know when you look and read the full transcript of Trump's speech on the ellipse on January 6th, he did very clearly say, it's in the transcript, it's also on video, where he clearly says we're going to go there peacefully, we're going to respect our law enforcement. And unfortunately, you had these bad actors involved. A lot of them, really brainwashed by the whole QAnon thing and other conspiracy theorists. And unfortunately, we had a tragic day.
Okay, Dan.
Yes, ma'am.
What topic do you want to bring up?
Well, I think that that there was some rhetoric that lends itself to some kind of action that should not. For instance, I've got a quote here. He said on January 6th, the crowd's going, "Fight for Trump, fight for Trump, fight for Trump." He said, "We have hundreds of thousands of people here. These people are not going to take it any longer. All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede where there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We'll not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. There's never been anything like this. We'll not let them silence our voices. We're not going to let it happen. Not going to let it happen." And so he said, you have to get your people to fight. If they don't fight, you have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. He didn't say anything peaceful here at all. And this is a direct quote from the film that was shot that day about what was going on. So there's nothing in there about peaceful. Nothing.
Yeah. Well, the speech, I imagine, went from back and forth. Yeah, I don't know. He's vague there, though. I mean, is he talking about let's fight right now, let's storm the Capitol, or is he just in general, fight, fight, fight? We need to fight for our rights.
Metaphorically.
And
after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength. You have to be strong. And now we're out here fighting. Something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So that was the end of that little speech. So that's why he was brought up on charges of inciting, because if you read that right there, that's verbatim what he said.
Yeah, and I'm just, I'm just blown away by Trump in general. I don't know if he has any idea what he's saying most of the time. I don't know if there's a method behind it, or if just whatever feels like coming out of his mouth just comes out of his mouth at any given moment.
Well, that's what I want my president.
Yeah, I know. I mean, William, you can maybe chime in on this, but I do not understand how people who want to uphold, the dignity of the country and the word of, the morality of the country, how they can rally behind someone who with no dignity and no morality. I mean, I guess it's just because he's well, we know why it is. It's because the powers that have been are not doing anything for people who are struggling. People who are struggling continue to struggle and struggle, and somehow this is what blows my mind. But somehow people think that Trump came out and said, "I'll make it different. I'll help you. I'm on your side. I don't care about I'm with you. I'm with you, the people." Um, he's obviously not. He's very different from the people, but they had no one else to turn to because the Democrats aren't helping him, Republicans aren't helping him, so maybe Trump will. And he didn't. He helped. He got into power and he helped corporations, and he helped the wealthy. And so
Yeah.
now I don't know why people are the people who were just like, we have to have something different. We have to have something that I mean, nobody else is doing anything for us. I don't know how many of those people are still with him, but apparently a lot of them.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out Tuesday night, or maybe
Yeah,
Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen on election day. I
yeah,
really don't.
probably more like Wednesday. It seems like it's going to
Uh,
be quite close.
yeah,
And
and, and just to be clear too, is that the story of my book has really nothing to do about Trump or Harris or
oh no,
Biden.
no, it's happening way in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
way in the future.
26.
My book is more an indictment of an extreme leftist ideology that I see. It's like a modern day Trojan horse that has invaded a very storied political party and continues to advance an agenda and a cause that eventually will attempt to push out uh, our Constitution, which is the foundation of our country, really, and will also, if unchecked, will take capitalism and get rid of it in its entirety.
okay,
So
well, let's talk about
Yeah.
capitalism for a minute. Not to gang up on you, William.
that's
Uh,
okay.
and
We can dialogue. I'm okay.
I mean, I do not know anything really about economy type stuff. So,
I had to learn
all I
about the
know is that
right
people are
thing.
hurting. Under the system that we have, the rich are thriving, the the and the no, I'm not hurting personally, but I mean, I'm doing fine. But there's so many people that are not, and anyway, and and that is the opinion of the show. We've done so many episodes against capitalism. One of them starred our friend Dan McCrory in his book Capitalism Killed the Middle Class. And I got to get Sean into this episode because this is his show. So I just wanted to read a recent Facebook post that I pulled off of his page. Um, Capitalism, as we know it, is a system that consistently prioritizes profit over people. From income inequality and environmental destruction to labor exploitation and political manipulation, capitalism's focus on maximizing profit has led to widespread harm and social instability. As the wealth gap widens, climate crises escalate, and healthcare becomes a privilege. It is clear that the system serves only the wealthy few while leaving the majority to struggle. If we are to build a society that values human welfare, equity, and sustainability, we must rethink our commitment to a system that so fundamentally disregards the common good. It is time to move beyond capitalism and work toward an economic model that serves people rather than preys upon them. And so that last line, I mean, I know socialism bad, and we don't really like to say socialism on this show because socialism in other countries communism in other countries has not been a pretty thing. But can we find and capitalism, it could be capitalism, but just a different capitalism. Can we find an economic model that will serve people rather than prey upon them?
You want me to answer that or Dan?
Oh, okay. Let's
Me?
start with Dan.
Okay.
And
I'm actually writing something called the 360 Manifesto, which takes the 19-page memo that was written in 1971 by Lewis Powell, who up to that point was famous for arguing in front of the Supreme Court that tobacco was not addicting. He was approached by somebody from the chamber, U.S. chamber, and said, "We got to quit we got to stop those hippies coming out here and saying that we're still in Vietnam because we're making money hand over fist." And so he said, "I'll write this memo for you." And it was followed by Nixon, who appointed him to the Supreme Court. Reagan had copies given to his cabinet. It's all about reassessing our values. In my case, I want to gut the document and make it about working people, the middle class, and democratic socialism is where I'm headed, because Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, all those kind of countries have that. They don't call it that, and we can call it whatever we want. But the fact is, it's the kind side, I guess you'd say, of capitalism. We need robust oversight of our corporations, and we need to make a worldwide thing, a global thing, that you judge how well a country's doing by how well their middle class is doing.
okay, William, what do you got?
Yeah. So first of all, it's just two obvious examples. My cell phone. I assume Dan's got a cell phone. Mackenzie, you have a cell phone. Those are all products of capitalism, right? Amazon.
Everything.
Dan and I, our books are for sale on Amazon.
Well,
Amazon is a product of capitalism.
yeah.
StreamYard, where this being streamed on, is a product of capitalism. Same with YouTube. So all up and down the line. Now, that being said, I'm not going to argue that capitalism is perfect. It's not. Capitalism has a flaw. And the flaw is greed.
Mm.
I say, anytime I have a conversation in a debate, when we start talking about capitalism and alternative economic models, I always say that the flaw of capitalism is greed. And that greed is more apparent now than it was in previous generations. However, that being said, even now, capitalism is still, I believe, the greatest economic engine of any country on the planet. It's interesting that prior to adopting capitalism in China, China was an extremely primitive and backwards country. I remember the days of Chairman Mao when he was running the country, and everybody was driving bicycles because no one had a car. And the only people that had cars were the elites within the Communist Party. And then finally he passes on, and you have Deng Xiaoping and these modern Chinese leaders that saw the value of capitalism, but will keep the political power. So you have this in China. I call it a hybrid. It's really a hybrid model where the government is communist, fully communist, but they have allowed the engine of capitalism to lift the Chinese nation into levels of wealth that now are on par with all the major wealthy industrialized nations. And so that didn't occur because of any kind of socialist slash Marxist economic model. That occurred because of capitalism. And so, I mean, I hear you both when you talk about injustices and how there is a segment of the population that is suffering. I totally agree with that. But I don't think that throwing the baby out with the bathwater is a solution. I think there has to be a way where you can regulate extremely wealthy companies and excise out of it the greed. I mean, there's no reason why, the top 12 executives in the C-suite should get a combined salary of, several $100 million. Meanwhile, the rest of the rank and file workers are told they can't have a raise, or, oh, yeah, I'm going to give you a 3% raise or something. There's something wrong and unjust about that. And part of that is the culture. I mean, I think, we've heard the term bully pulpit, and the presidency can be a bully pulpit effectively with the right person at the helm. And, they can use that bully pulpit really to challenge corporate America to do a better job of spreading the wealth around, not by stealing it. In the case of, I think, redistribution of wealth is really some kind of legalized effort of theft, but really to have a look in the mirror moment, and say, it's probably grotesque that I made $80 million this year, and meanwhile the workers on the line are getting a cost of living increase. And that's where the bully pulpit, I think, can be effective to try and change the culture in companies where this kind of greed exists. And I know it's not across the board, because I think when you go, you look at some of the companies, some of the tech companies, and you hear about some of their tremendous benefits they have. I know my son is a new dad, and he's getting a couple months of paternity leave. I mean, who ever heard of paternity leave several
Well,
years
that's funny because that's something that President Cyrus wanted, and apparently everything that President Cyrus wants is terrible. And I'm thinking, how can
Well,
really
no, that's not true. But when I put that stuff in there, that was just it was kind of a compendium of things that you frequently hear about, that people on the left of the political spectrum advocate for. Some of it's good, some of it, maybe we can have a compromise here on something, but but
Now, just let me say one more thing real quick, and then you can go back. The first thing that President Cyrus mentions is a UBI, universal basic
universal basic income. Yes, I know that
and
it comes over from Europe.
being the bleeding heart that I am, I've always been very pro UBI, but then we had an economist, a very progressive liberal economist, come onto our show and say, "You guys are idiots. Why do you keep spouting about UBI? That would never work." And so now I have to. Unfortunately, I haven't researched into his theories on why it wouldn't work, but yeah, I mean, I'm certainly willing to learn to. I mean, a lot of the beliefs that I have, I just want people to do better. I want to help people, and and so I spout some of the stuff that I've heard. But if that's not really going to help people, then I don't want to do it.
Yeah,
So that's where we need to
yeah,
listen to each other.
right.
And yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Universal basic income would help if it was a substantial amount of money. People who are been tiny, though, have been talking about lower sums. Nixon was for it until he was told by his people that people would call it welfare for all, so he backed away from the whole
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah, we need to get beyond the terminology, but we never will.
Yes.
Well, yeah, you mentioned welfare. I know welfare, originates, of course, from President Johnson's Great Society back in the mid '60s, when he introduced that. And I've been following very closely I guess you could call it an open revolt right now. There's an open revolt in some demographics within the Black community against some of these policies that have benefited them for generations. And they're seeing, I mean, I'm paraphrasing what they're seeing, but they're seeing that it hasn't really benefited them well in the ways that would lead to lasting and positive change. You have
Yeah, no.
entire generations that are just stuck and waiting for their next check, and
But
they're
what
not
do you
being
do,
lifted up.
though? That
Well,
that's the thing is we have to figure out what is going to lift them up
sure. Well,
rather than
here's an
just say,
example where
"Oh, welfare is bad and all the people who are on it."
sure, no, I totally agree. Here's an
Yeah.
example where you have left-leaning individuals and a right-leaning individual coming in a room and having civil dialogue. Okay, how about we give free college to their young
Yes.
so that they can uh, be brought to a level of education that is going to benefit them in a career, or because I know the trade schools are getting popular again. There's a lot of high schoolers are opting for trade school now because
Mhm.
they're hearing all these horror stories from their
Yeah.
older siblings or somebody's, whatever, about the ridiculous cost of college. So something there has to be a mechanism where you lift up these young community members and give them a hope and a chance. And certainly, the idea of giving them a higher education or giving them a trade that they can go out and start making money with right away. I mean, to me, is an attractive idea versus just giving them a check. I mean, I've seen I watch them. I see their podcasts, their channels, and they talk about wanting not wanting a handout, but wanting a leg up. Give them a leg up instead of a handout.
Yeah, I mean, welfare is you're never gonna be able to get ahead on welfare, and
Right.
I'm not saying, like, just give people more money, but it is and it's hard to do, though, because, I mean, you talk ab if we were to make college education free, which it absolutely should be, or at least affordable, um,
It's an investment in our future.
it has to be more than that. It has to go down lower because you can't just throw someone into college and say, "There, swim." You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
They have to have the groundwork to be prepared for college, and then we had the No Child Left Behind we were trying to get kids in preschool and start their development,
Yeah.
and that has not worked.
Yeah.
But we need to figure
Yeah.
out we need to examine why it has not worked and try again.
Sure.
Okay, Dan, what did you have to say?
When William and I went to college,
Mm.
the emphasis was on getting grants, and the capitalistic model changed that. All of a sudden, it became about getting loans because I guess part of the money coming back from those loans goes to the institution. So we moved from a model that was working for a middle class that wanted to go to college to one that didn't work anymore for people in the middle class. So that was due to greedy capitalism.
Yeah.
Well, I think I see it a little differently, Dan, with all respect. I think what happened, and I don't know why, but the cost just, it didn't quadruple. It quintuple to the 10th power. I mean, for Pete's sake, it's ridiculous what it costs. And why is it that expensive? And this is where I think it would be great. This would be a great thing for Congress to look into. Get both sides of the aisle in a room and say, let's have a deep dive. Why does a college education cost as much as it does as compared to, call it 20 years ago?
Mhm.
And there has to be a reason. I have some theories, ideas, but uh, you know, I don't know. But get the experts in the room and sit figure out, because if you could take, and so the to your point, Dan, is that yeah, back in the day it was about getting grant money. And oh, by the way, I mean, they're talking about a bunny trail, grant money. Why is that so hard to get? There's billions and
Exactly.
billions of dollars hiding in bank accounts that it's like pulling teeth to try and get the money out of them. And I'm not talking about Pell grants and stuff like that. Those are relatively easy, but you got all these foundations by all these people that have these foundations, but getting back to what I was saying, why is it cost so much? Because it is that increased cost that is fueling the need for a loan. and with all due respect to what you said, Dan, I think that's the driver behind getting the loans, is that it costs so much money. My first car would cost me $300. I had to fix up a little bit, but now it's like, a high schooler trying to buy a car. Even the used cars are crazy, So you got to go get a loan, or mom and dad, or mom, has to buy it for them, or they take out a loan to get it for them. And so, but clearly, I think getting back to the concern about, lifting communities up that have historically struggled, and that's regardless of color. There's parts of Appalachia that are the same way. They're just, I feel horrible for them. There's a way to lift these members of our society up, and I really am convinced it's to figure out first of all, the cost of college, to drive it down or subsidize it somehow. But also, there's some culpability with some of these bigger colleges. I heard a number once. It was insane that the Harvard University Endowment Fund was like in this multi-billions of dollars. Well, why do they need an endowment of multi-billions of dollars? They should be, taking a large chunk of that and say, okay, let's pass this along to a younger generation that would benefit from having an education in an Ivy League school. So I probably talked too much. Even though your book is 170 pages, Dan, I demand you get equal time. So you go ahead and talk.
I think I got my equal time, but thank you. I do think that a free college is an investment in our future, in the country's future, the future of our kids. And I think it's a really important idea that you and I should talk about.
Yeah.
What seems to be missing from, like I said, I'm not an economist. Money is just money stuff, but I would think that all of the people who are greedy and who want more of it, you would think that they would realize that if the whole country was doing better, they would do better too as well.
Yeah.
You don't need to. It seems like that's just common sense, that if people were better educated, if people and I can come up with other theories why they don't want an educated population, but the main thing I think on the capitalism front is, and it's not even the capitalism per se, but there's so much money in politics. There's no way either side of the aisle is going to, and that's why I was so thrilled with the idea of term limits. All they do is spend time campaigning for money so they can be reelected, and there's nobody.
You would think that would be the answer.
People, because the people don't have money, and the people can't.
Term limits fixes all that. Term limits absolutely fixes all that.
Yeah, that's.
It does.
And
it keeps
some kind of campaign reform.
What we need is to extend limits. We need to go from 4-year office to 6-year office, because then they're not spending money or trying to raise money from day one. They're actually doing some work.
What about a pool of campaign funds that is divided evenly between candidates? I don't know how you would limit the candidates in this case. Fairly limit the candidates. But all we have is super rich people who stay in power and get power and cling to power and stay in power. But maybe if we changed the way elections are financed, we don't. With the internet now, although the internet has become a minefield for misinformation too, but you think that you could campaign pretty much without, I don't think you need as much money to campaign as I don't know. Like I said, I don't know money. I don't know where they use all that money. Why do you need money to campaign?
Actually,
you need for ads on YouTube and TV and radio.
Yeah, but we're talking like
You need
so
face.
much money, and I haven't seen one
You
single
need.
thing.
I ran for state assembly in California in
Yeah.
2009 and 2013. And what I found was when I went to get endorsements, first thing they asked me was, how much money have you raised? They didn't ask me where I stood on this issue or that
Right.
issue. It was all about being seen as viable because I raised so much money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right, that's going to
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't think anything will change for the better or for the worse, and nothing's going to change at all as long as money is just controlling everything in politics.
Yeah. I want to bring up
Yeah.
cite an example of a modern day example of when a country switched from capitalism to socialism. That was, of course, Venezuela. And they, at one time, uh, the GDP in Venezuela was as high as fourth in all South America. And then after Hugo Chavez came in, who was a socialist, and he switched over to a socialist economic system. I mean, the country collapsed to the point where it was now ranked 12th in 2020. And of course, we know uh, just from the news reports that Maduro, the current authoritarian in Venezuela, basically engineered a fake election where he got some crazy, stupid percentage of the vote that defies all the common algorithms of elections. But so there's another example of authoritarian figuring out a way to stay in power, right? So, and then you have all these Venezuelans that, because the country's turned into a crap hole, that they have fled the country. And of course, a lot of them wound up in our southern border, are now in the various states of the union because the things have gotten so bad there. But of course, unfortunately, what came with that tide were criminal elements as well. So
No.
We were responsible for regime change in Venezuela back in the 50s, and they remembered that. And they said that they wanted Hugo Chavez to play ball with the U.S. And he said no. Remember, he made a comment about uh, Bush at the UN smelling like sulfur in the room because we were dealing with the devil. And because he wouldn't play ball with us, this whole thing came about and caused a coup that we supported that unfortunately blew up in our faces.
We're
And
getting,
now Venezuela is also suffering the consequences.
yeah,
so
Sorry,
William,
Mackenzie.
William, what do you think about then the countries that are practicing socialism but not calling it that? The European, mostly Scandinavian countries that are taking care of their people. Is there a way that we can look at some of those things that are working and implement them in the United States without using the word socialism? And I mean, because it seems like the socialist regimes that it's the problem is that it's corruption, it's wanting power, it's not about wanting to help people or make things more equitable for the population. Um, so it's really just taking the definition of what socialism is supposed to be and perverting it to the causes of the corrupt governments. But do you think that some combination of capitalism and socialism could work?
you know, I think when you start talking about Europe, you have to be sensitive to the fact that while some of them are utilizing socialism and some of them may call it something else, but um, it's not without problems. The healthcare system in England is broke. The healthcare system in some other countries is straining under the weight of trying to provide healthcare for free for its populace. And one of the common threads you see in a lot of European countries is that, let's say, for example, you make $100 a day. I'm just using that as a simplified illustration. Well, at the end of the day, you don't walk away with $100. You walk away with 30 or 40 because the rest of it's being given over to the state. So,
But
we're
overall,
still,
those people are just doing better, though. I mean, you can
Yes,
the argument that you're bringing home less money, you're also putting out so much less money, so it all evens out.
well, you'd want to obviously do a deep dive on the GDP of each of these countries and analyze that. I don't pretend to know it. I'm just
Yeah,
saying that I know that there are problems in Europe because of socialism and socialist economic policies. Um, are there bright spots? Probably. You know, I mean, it's no secret, obviously, that you know Social Security here in America. I mean, for all intents and purposes, uh, is a government you know check for Americans that have paid into the system all their lives.
right.
Um, and some would argue it's a socialist idea. Um,
it is.
so all that to say is that again, should we throw it all away and start with something new?
Well, I don't see how.
My argument is no.
Yeah,
What
you
you
well,
do
you
is
can't
it's
throw
it's,
it
it's
all
like
away.
it's like when your car has a problem, right?
Mhm.
You know it's fixable, so you
Right,
fix it, right?
exactly.
You don't call up the auto wrecker and say, "Here, come take my car," even though it's fixable. So the idea of demolishing our country's economic engine because there's problems, um, I just I'm not there. I'm not convinced that's the solution. I think that the solution is to have smart minds meet together across the spectrum and figure out where's the Achilles heel
Mhm.
and how do we bring our incredible talents and wealth and brain power to bear and address the issues.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It comes down to greed, and how do we fix greed, and
Yeah,
how do we convince greed that they'll be just as well off, or not, if not better off, when everybody is doing well in
yeah.
the country.
Oh, it comes to mind an example. I don't know how Italy's doing right now, but Italy went full socialism, a few
And they
decades ago. It darn near broke the country. And same with Greece. Greece had a socialist
How do you
system that almost broke the
even go
country.
full socialist? I don't know how you flip a switch and get rid of capitalism. And I mean, I
No,
was in Italy, and
what happened,
you go and you buy things. That's capitalism, right? Stores hadn't shut down.
unfortunately, with Greece, what happened was the IMF wanted them to create this whole concept of austerity, and
Yeah,
instead of
yeah,
reinvesting in
yeah. I
the
remember
country,
that.
building up
Yeah,
that way. Yeah. And if you want to see if our healthcare system is working really well, look out on the street and see how many tents are out there. We do have socialist aspects of our society besides Social Security. We've got public libraries, public schools, the fire department, the police department. All those are socialist concepts and social uh, in the way that they deal with everybody in society. So we've already got aspects of a democratic socialism. We just have to allow it to provide robust oversight of our corporations, who are the first ones to become predatory when it comes time to make some more money.
So yeah, I mean, as far as healthcare is concerned, I mean, I'm now entrenched in the culture of cancer, um, and there are so many people I know with cancer. All these new friends I'm making. Um, there's so many of them that getting sick has destroyed them economically. I just like last week talked with my friend whose mother was diagnosed with cancer. She needed to start her radiation treatments. They are not in a position. I mean, she's an older woman and has Medicare, but still, her radiologist would not even begin her treatment unless she could give him $1,000 up front, which was simply not in the family in the budget between her and her son. And so they just had to turn to
Healthcare should not be for profit.
and fortunately their church was able, the church was like, here's the money so you can start your treatments as scheduled. But that's that set of treatments. What about the next treatments and the next treatments? And there are so many of these stories and I'm just so lucky because my job as a home care aide, we have an amazing union that and a governor who has been very supportive of healthcare workers, and I just have incredible insurance. And my insurance, my treatments, my cancer treatments are $23,000 each time I go in.
Wow.
$23,000, and I pay a deductible. I pay $25 a month for my insurance, and my deductible is capped at $1,500. So I never have to pay more than $1,500 a year. So I'm super, super, super lucky in this sense. But okay, what happens if I can't work? If I go 1 month without putting in 80 hours of work, then I lose that insurance. And and if my client goes into the hospital and I lose my hour, and I can't work 80 hours that month because my client is not available for me to serve, then again I lose my insurance. I mean, you shouldn't be in a system where if you're too sick to work, you're also too sick to. I mean, you also aren't able to get health care. And so, I mean, what I have to do is I have to make sure that I always have 80 hours of vacation time, set aside and waiting. So if I feel so bad that I can't work for a month, I at least get 1 more month of insurance.
I'm working on a single parent.
Yeah, at any moment I could I could go on disability, and then after 2 years on disability, then I would start getting Medicare. But I would not. How can I, on a disability check? How can I mean, Medicare only pays so much. How can I afford the rest of it? So, yeah, I mean, I don't know who has a system that's working perfectly, but it's certainly not us.
No, ours it's a for-profit model. I go to Kaiser Permanente, which was originally a nonprofit, and they've managed to keep some of that spirit of the nonprofit within their ranks, even as they jack up the prices. But they're nowhere near what some of them are charging for aspirin or a service or whatever. But I think the answer is Medicare for All is one of the names they call it, and single payer. We're working on it within California and also at the federal.
Yeah,
and it is the answer.
Wealthy could still get right in with they can still use their money to get the best health care.
Actually, they say it'll be cheaper. The studies. So I don't think we're going to come up with all the answers here, though, are we?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we may come up with super answers, but how are we going to get those answers?
Yeah, in general, I agree that the healthcare system, from an economic standpoint and a coverage standpoint, is broke and needs to be looked at. That's another thing that would be great to get some really smart minds in a room and figure out why is this pill, $10,000 for one stinking pill? Why is this vial of liquid that you're gonna put in my veins, the same amount? I mean, there's something wrong. these costs are so exorbitant. I don't pretend to know the answer why they're so expensive, but clearly there's something wrong, and it should be looked at. I think that every American should have access to health care. There's just no question, right? There's no way that the richest country on the planet should be telling any of its citizens, "Oh, you're not entitled to health care because you're unemployed, you're whatever." I mean, it's not something that's befitting in calling us the greatest nation on the earth. So, so in concept, I agree with the idea that that healthcare is another big issue that needs to be looked at as far as affordability and availability, and also obviously level of care as well. So,
if I may ask, William, what's your next book going to be about?
I'm tossing around a couple of
ideas.
I'm sorry? What did you say?
You are working on the next one, right?
No,
you're working on your next book?
I've been so busy promoting this one. I haven't had time to sit down and start writing a third book. So I got a couple ideas I'm tossing around. So, but just rough ideas right now. So, if I told you what it was, I might change my mind. Then I'd be embarrassed. Like, oh, I just lied on the podcast.
Or Dan might steal it too. Dan, you can have my idea about robot sex. You take the robot sex and run with it.
Okay, it says you'll be sorry.
All right, well, we are about at our time. Does anybody have some final thoughts?
Go ahead, Dan. You want to go first?
Okay, well, like I said, I hope my book doesn't come true, but even though some facets of it already have, and that's why I wrote it. I also wanted to reflect the anger that I saw in the Native American community about how they've been treated. They've had numerous marches about all the treaties that have been broken over the last century, and that's the anger that I infused the book with. And I would love to talk to you guys again after you finish reading it to see what you think, because the proof's in the pudding, right? It's a short book, so.
Yeah, no, it is a short book.
Yeah, closing thoughts. Been great to be on your show, Mackenzie, and give my regards to Sean. It's been nice to dialogue with you, Dan. I respect your opinions and also the time you put into your book out. So I also, like you, don't want to see anything even remotely close to the scenario that's in my book. And may your book and my book be used as a tool, really, in warning to all Americans, really, that we have to be vigilant to defend our republic and to ensure that extremists, no matter from what spectrum, left or right, extremists are not given a platform by which they can either expand their power base or even get a power base at all. So I think we owe that to those living and those that will live in the future generations, to make sure that we do our part to protect or preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
I'm happy to see that we've presented a way that people can talk about these issues without going to the extremes of anger and things like that. And we can have these conversations.
That was the key goal of mine coming on this show, is like, oh, yeah, I can go on and talk and be civil and exchange ideas. I mean, we can agree to disagree, but hopefully we're leaving the show and we wouldn't hesitate to come back on some future episode. So
I think we've all settled on the same place of, hey, we don't need to tear anything down.
right.
We just need to remodel it. And we need to remodel it in a way that works for everyone. And
Yeah.
I hope to see that someday. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And I hope that, audience, I hope that you'll all go and remember, William's book is on sale right now for the next couple of days. Get these books, see what the extreme cases could be if we just can't stop being angry at the other side.
Yeah. For
all
sure.
we need to do, exactly. All we need to do is just figure out what we want. We'll find out that more or less it's going to be the same thing, and figure out how to get there, and get the money out of politics, and get the anger, somehow get past this battle that we have where both sides are distorting the truth just to promote these narratives to incite each other. I mean, and both parties have members that want to stay in power, and they use these issues, these hot button issues, to keep themselves in power. And term limits. I mean, William's book has an excellent idea about, if people weren't if people went in to a job in politics thinking, I'm going to make this country better, rather than I'm going to get some power and then I'm going to dedicate myself to keeping that power, then that's the country that I want to live in.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody, so much. And we will see you on Tuesday at our regular scheduled time for Coup Save America.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Coup Save